Hey guys, Landon Beckham here. I'm going to give y'all a quick recap of our Lake Holbrook tournament where we actually ended up coming in first place. We had 15.67 pounds. I'm going to go over our four baits that really allowed us to excel in this tournament. Now before I get into the four baits we threw to really excel in this tournament, I kind of want to talk to y'all about the lake conditions. Lake Holbrook, it's about a 600-acre lake. It's a really small lake, about 15 miles away from Lake Fork. The water clarity in some areas we fished was probably 6 inches to a foot, but that was a real backwater areas we had. Most of our spots were probably 2 to 3 foot visibility, so it was pretty decent. But the water temperature, it was 68 when we launched in the mornings. It kind of rose a lot actually. It was about 78 when we got off the water, and that's just because we had full sunshine Friday and Saturday. Now Friday there was no wind, as y'all can probably hear. There's a lot of wind here right now, but there was no wind and it made sight fishing really fun. About 12 o'clock we put all our rods in the rod locker. We put that trolling motor on high. We just went looking for them, and it was pretty incredible. There was all kinds of fish shallow. We saw two big ones about 6 pounds we had marked, but other than that a lot of them were just 2 to 3 pounds. So we were pretty excited going into tournament day. We knew the conditions were going to change a little bit, but we really didn't think that we'd have to stray away from our sight fishing pattern. Unfortunately, as most tournaments do, tournament day is completely different. We had a probably 6-7 mile an hour south wind, which really killed all of our sight fish. All our fish were on north banks, so with that south wind, it kind of screwed everything up for us. Unfortunately, we couldn't catch any of our fish off of beds. We did have to make a lot of adjustments during the day, but we made the right ones and it turned out. So let's go over our four baits that really helped us win this tournament. Now the first bait I want to talk to y'all about that really helped us excel in this tournament is a Topwater Frog. Now everybody knows in the spring these Topwater Frogs can be absolutely deadly. What I was throwing was a pad crasher, and it's just in this brown color here, and as you can tell they have been absolutely chomping on this thing. But the key with this thing was they were really shallow in the mornings, and so we had to throw this thing on the bank, and as soon as it cleared, it wasn't like grass, it was just kind of matted cover, and as soon as it cleared that matted cover, I mean, they would unload on this thing. We pre-fished Friday, and I didn't tape my hooks or anything. I just left it like it was, and it was insane. I bet in the first 15 minutes we had 4 or 5 fish just blow up on this thing. And I automatically put this thing back in my rod box because I knew I was going to chunk it during the tournament. Kind of my setup I have, this is a Daiwa Tatula. I got 50-pound Berkeley braid on here, and I'm using just a H2O 7-foot heavy rod. The reason I've got H2O, I mean, I'm not really that big a fan of the rods. However, I've broken 3 frog rods this year, so this was kind of a cheaper rod that if I broke I wouldn't cry over it. Now unfortunately during Saturday's tournament we really did not catch any big fish. I had one fish, we're guessing was probably 5 pounds. Blew up on it, we had her all the way to the boat, about to net her, and she just popped off. But other than that, I think we had one keeper on this thing, so it really wasn't that big a player come tournament day, unfortunately. But let's get into my second weapon of choice from Saturday. And that's going to be a topwater popper. Now, Friday, caught one about 4.5 on this thing. It was in 16 foot of water. They were kind of schooling, so I just kind of had this thing on in the morning just in case they started schooling. But what really happened was they were really short striking our frogs in the morning, and so what would happen, I'd throw this thing really close to that grass and just kind of pop it once or twice and just kind of leave it there, and that's when they would really dial in on this thing. As you can see, I kind of beefed up my front hook. I did have that 4.5 Friday and it bent out one of the hooks, so I really wanted to make sure that if one of those big ones bit, I would get them in. Kind of my setup for this one, this is just a loose speed spool reel. I'm actually throwing 17 pound, which seems a little bit big for a topwater popper, but the areas we were fishing were really grassy and I really didn't want to take any chances with them. And this is, again, it's a H2O 6'6" medium heavy rod. I really like this rod. It's really light, really comfortable. This whole setup here is really good. And the topwater, it caught one of our keepers, but again, it really wasn't that big a deal come tournament day. But it was nice to get a few fish in the boat that morning to kind of relax us a little bit. But all right, let's talk about our third weapon of choice here. and that's going to be a flipping bait slash bedfish bait for us. This is just a 3/4 ounce tungsten weight tied onto a trocar hook with the pit boss is the actual soft plastic. I was throwing this on 30-pound braid, just a ski reach reel and a heavy TFO rod. This was a really versatile bait for us this week. We could flip mats with it. I had it pegged. I don't have it pegged right now. But where this bait really excelled was when we located a fish on a bed. And a lot of these fish were, a lot of them were post spawn because the water temp was just so high. We were really surprised they were still on beds. But when we located a fish on a bed and we just couldn't get it to bite, I'd throw this thing across that bed and I'd just slam this 3/4 ounce weight into the side of her. And you do that 3 or 4 times and she's going to get ticked off, and that's what happened. And they finally started eating this thing. Friday, this thing was insane. I mean, we'd throw it, and really the key with this was finding little schools of their fry, because they had just got done spawning. Those females were still guarding that fry. And we'd throw this in the middle of that fry, and that bass would just dart to it and nail it. And it was a really cool deal. Unfortunately, Saturday, the wind really picked up, so we really couldn't use this bait to the best of its abilities on Saturday. But all in all, this was just a great bait for us this weekend, and it caught a lot of fish. So let's get into the #1 bait for this weekend that caught. We had 2 4-pounders, and we caught some more fish on it too, but this was really our kicker bait, and that is none other than the umbrella rig right here. This is just a Flash Mob Junior, basically what everyone throws. It's kind of, I just had this feeling, you get that feeling during tournament day, you need to be throwing a certain bait, and this is the one that really grabbed my attention, and I started chunking it. But where we were catching these fish, it was really key, because what happened was Friday, those fish were all on the bank. We could go probably 100 yards and see 50, probably 2-pound fish. However, Saturday came along, a lot more boats on the water, and a little lake like that, you start getting a little boat activity, those fish start shutting down on us. So what happened was those fish pulled off into probably the 5 to 8 foot range, and that's where we were throwing this. The key was to find a big spawning flat that had deep water access next to it. And what we would do is we'd parallel cast to the bank in about 5 to 6 foot of water, and that's where those big girls were at. They were post spawn. We caught one that was probably 22 inches long, and she weighed 4.4 pounds. She was just, there was no meat on her at all. But this was a really key deal for us. As far as the swim baits I've got on, this is just a KVD Sexy Swimmer, and my trailer was this is a Reaction Innovation Skinny Dipper in the Sexy Shad color, and this is really the one that every single one came off of, is this last one. My setup for it, this is 17-pound fluoro clear. I don't like throwing braid on them. I just don't think it's necessary. This is a Speed Spool Super Duty reel, and this reel really helps because it takes a lot of pressure off of you. It's a 6/4 to 1, so it's just a perfect reel for it. You don't want to go to 7 to 1; it'll absolutely wear you out. And this is just a all-star worm rod, and it really loads up well, and you could really throw this thing a long way. But this is really the key for us this Saturday, and it ended up winning us the tournament, So that's the recap of Lake Holbrook. It was a great weekend for us. We caught a lot of good fish in 2 days we fished Holbrook. I highly recommend that lake. If you live anywhere near Fork and you're tired of that fishing pressure on Fork, head over to Holbrook, man. There's a lot of good fish, and they're shallow right now. However, in about a week or 2, they will be on that post-spawn pattern, so I'd get out there real soon. Hope these patterns will help you next time you're out, and I'll talk to you soon.